Hello everyone! Thank you so much for clicking on this video today.
I'm really glad you're here, and I appreciate you choosing to spend your time improving your English with me. Before we begin, if you enjoy learning English through natural conversations, real-life examples, and advanced practice, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel.
Your support helps us grow and helps learners around the world reach higher levels of English fluency. As you continue learning, new words should start to feel natural and become part of your everyday speech. Let's begin with a simple idea. At the C1 level, the goal is not just to communicate, it's to express yourself with precision and depth. Instead of saying, "I'm happy," you might say, "I'm delighted." Instead of "it's very big," you could say, "it's enormous." These choices make your English sound more refined, vivid, and expressive. However, advanced vocabulary is not about sounding complicated. It's about selecting the exact word that matches your meaning and the situation. Imagine you've had a long day at work and a friend asks, "How are you feeling?" A beginner might answer, "I'm tired." At a C1 level, you could say, "I'm exhausted," or even, "I'm drained," to show that your energy is completely gone. Notice how these words create a clearer emotional image. Let's practice together. Repeat slowly. I'm exhausted. I'm drained. I'm worn out. Can you hear how much stronger these sound compared to simply saying tired? Now let's connect these expressions to everyday situations. Picture yourself walking home after carrying heavy bags of groceries. You might say, "I feel exhausted." Say it with me, "I feel exhausted." Next, imagine you stayed awake all night studying or watching movies. In the morning, you might say, "I'm completely drained." Repeat, "I'm completely drained." These exercises are not only about learning vocabulary, they help you build the habit of using richer language naturally in real life. Another powerful area to develop at the C1 level is emotional vocabulary. In daily conversations, people often say, "I'm sad" or "I'm angry." Advanced speakers use more precise words. You could say, "I'm devastated" to express deep sadness, "I'm frustrated" to show irritation mixed with disappointment, or "I'm furious" to express intense anger. Let's practice. I'm devastated. I'm frustrated. I'm furious. Excellent. Now imagine different scenarios. You didn't pass an important exam, even though you prepared a lot. You might say, "I'm devastated." Repeat it. I'm devastated. Your computer suddenly stops working before a presentation. I'm frustrated. Say it now. I'm frustrated. Someone cuts in front of you in a long line. I'm furious. Repeat. I'm furious. Using these words helps you sound more natural and precise, which is a key feature of a C1 speaker. Here's another activity. I'll give you a simple word, and you think of a stronger alternative. The word is happy. Advanced options could be joyful, thrilled, or ecstatic. Let's practice them in sentences. I'm thrilled to see you. She was ecstatic about her new job. They were joyful after hearing the good news. Great work. Now let's reverse the exercise. I'll say the advanced word, and you imagine the simpler version. If I say enormous, you think very big. If I say furious, you think very angry. If I say delighted, you think very happy. This kind of back and forth practice strengthens your vocabulary connections and helps you recall words faster during real conversations. At the C1 level, it's also important to understand subtle differences between similar words. For example, instead of always saying interesting, you could use fascinating when something fully captures your attention, or intriguing when something makes you curious and slightly puzzled. Let's practice. That movie was fascinating. This book is intriguing. Notice how each word carries a slightly different feeling. This story is intriguing. The story is intriguing. Or picture yourself in a museum, unable to stop looking at a painting. The painting is fascinating. Say it with me. The painting is fascinating. These choices show that your vocabulary has moved beyond the basic level and now adds depth to your expression. Advanced vocabulary also helps you describe situations more accurately. Take the word important. Many learners use it constantly, but at C1 you have more precise options. Crucial describes something absolutely necessary. Significant highlights impact or meaning, and vital refers to something essential for success or survival. Let's practice. This meeting is crucial. Her research is significant. Water is vital for life. Now imagine practical situations. Your boss asks why a deadline cannot be missed. You might say, "It is crucial that we finish this project on time." Repeat, "It is crucial that we finish this project on time." When talking about history, you could say, "This was a significant moment in the country's development." Practice that sentence. And if you are teaching children, you might explain, "Healthy food is vital for your growth." These alternatives help your speech sound clearer and more professional. Another area where advanced vocabulary stands out is describing change. Beginners often repeat the word change, but at higher levels, you can choose more specific verbs. Transform suggests a complete change. Evolve describes gradual development, and adapt means adjusting to a new situation. Repeat after me. Technology has transformed our lives. The language continues to evolve. We must adapt to new environments. Let's apply these words to everyday life. If you buy a new phone that improves your routine, you could say, "This phone has transformed the way I work." Repeat it. If your English improves little by little, you might say, "My English is evolving every day." And if you move to another country, you could say, "I need to adapt to the culture here." Practicing with realistic examples makes new vocabulary easier to remember. Finally, advanced vocabulary is also about nuance, small differences in meaning. Consider the verbs look, stare, and glance. Look is general. Stare means looking for a long time with intensity, and glance means looking quickly. Let's try them. He stared at the painting for hours. She glanced at her phone and smiled. They looked out of the window together. Imagine different scenes. You are in a park watching a child stare at ducks in a pond. The child stared at the ducks in the pond. Repeat that. You check the time quickly before leaving. I glanced at the clock. Say it again. Or you sit in a cafe watching the street while drinking coffee. I looked out at the street. Practicing these distinctions makes your English more vivid, expressive, and natural at an advanced level. Let's also look at some advanced connectors that help your speech sound more polished and professional. At a basic level, learners often use because to explain reasons, but at the C1 level, you can expand your range with phrases like due to, owing to, or as a result of. For example, the flight was delayed due to bad weather. Repeat it slowly and clearly. Another example, owing to her hard work, she passed the exam. And finally, as a result of the accident, the road was closed. These structures instantly make your English sound more formal and precise. Now imagine everyday situations. Instead of saying, "I was late because of traffic," you could say, "I was late due to heavy traffic." Repeat it and notice how it sounds more advanced. Or, when explaining success, you might say, "Owing to their preparation, the team won easily." Using these connectors adds clarity and gives your speech a more academic tone, which is especially useful at higher levels. Another area where advanced vocabulary makes a big difference is describing people's behavior. Rather than saying someone is nice, you could describe them as considerate. Instead of mean, you might say spiteful. And instead of lazy, you could use idle or sluggish, depending on the context. Let's practice a few examples. She is very considerate of others. He was spiteful after losing the game. I felt sluggish after eating too much food. These words help you express both actions and emotions with greater detail. Picture different scenarios in your mind. A friend who always thinks about others could be described as very considerate. Someone who intentionally says hurtful things might be called spiteful. And after a big holiday meal, you might say, I felt sluggish after eating so much food. When you choose more specific vocabulary, your English becomes richer and more expressive. At this stage, it's also important to develop language that describes time more accurately. Beginners often rely on words like soon or later, but at C1, you can say imminent for something about to happen very soon, forthcoming for something expected in the near future, and prolonged for something lasting longer than normal. For example, the storm is imminent. We had a forthcoming meeting. The illness caused a prolonged absence. These choices add nuance and sophistication to your speech. Let's imagine some real situations. If you're waiting for an important phone call, instead of saying the call is coming soon, you could say the call is imminent. When talking about an upcoming exam, you might say the exam is forthcoming. And instead of saying the winter was very long, you could describe it as a prolonged winter. These small changes make your language sound more professional and precise. Another useful vocabulary group focuses on success and failure. Rather than repeating the word success, you can use achievement or accomplishment. Instead of simply saying failure, you might choose setback or downfall, depending on the context. For instance, winning the award was her greatest achievement. Finishing the marathon was a huge accomplishment. The team faced a major setback during the project. Notice how each word adds a slightly different meaning. Imagine passing a difficult exam after months of effort. You might proudly say, "This is my greatest accomplishment." If something doesn't go according to plan, you could say, "We experienced a setback, but we will try again." And when discussing business or history, you might hear, "The company's downfall came after years of poor management." Using these alternatives helps you communicate with more precision and confidence. Let's move on to vocabulary describing movement. Basic verbs like walk or run are useful, but advanced learners often choose more descriptive options. Stroll suggests a slow, relaxed walk. Dash describes running quickly for a short distance, and wander means walking without a clear direction. Practice with these sentences. They strolled along the beach at sunset. He dashed to catch the bus. She wandered through the old streets. Each verb creates a more vivid image. Visualize different scenes. On vacation by the sea, you might say, "We strolled along the beach." If you're late and rushing, you could say, "I dashed into the office." And while exploring a new city without a map, you might explain, "I wandered around the city center." These choices add atmosphere and detail, making your storytelling more engaging. Finally, let's look at advanced ways to express opinions. Many learners rely heavily on "I think," but at the C1 level, you can vary your language with phrases like "I believe," "I suppose," "I assume," or "I reckon" in informal contexts. For example, "I believe this is the best solution." "I suppose we could try a different method." These alternatives help your speech sound more natural and confident. Imagine a meeting at work. Instead of saying, "I think this will work," you might say, "I believe this is the best solution." In a casual conversation, rather than saying, I think he's coming, you could say, I suppose he's coming later. And when making a guess about the weather, you might add, I reckon it's going to rain. Expanding your range of opinion phrases allows you to sound more fluent, flexible, and advanced in everyday conversations. Using a wider range of expressions makes your English sound more natural and flexible. At the C1 level, it's especially helpful to describe possibilities with greater accuracy. Instead of simply saying it's possible, you can choose more precise options, such as it's likely, it's improbable, or it's inevitable. For example, it's likely that she will win the competition. Repeat it slowly. Another example, it's improbable that they will arrive on time with this traffic. And finally, it's inevitable that technology will continue to develop. These words allow you to show different levels of certainty and sound more confident when speaking. Now, imagine giving advice to a friend about a job application. Rather than saying something basic, you could explain, it's likely you will get the job because you are very qualified. Or picture yourself waiting for someone who is late. You might say, it's improbable that he will arrive on time now. When talking about the future, you could add depth by saying, it's inevitable that we will face challenges. Expressions like these help your speech sound thoughtful and advanced. Let's move on to vocabulary connected to communication. Beginners often rely on verbs like say or tell, but at higher levels, you can use more specific words, such as declare, announce, confess, or reveal. Each verb carries a slightly different nuance. For instance, the president declared a new policy. The teacher announced the results. He confessed to making a mistake. She revealed her secret to her best friend. Using these verbs makes your storytelling clearer and more precise. Imagine a workplace situation where a manager shares good news. Instead of saying, she told us, you could say, she announced the good news. Or think about someone finally admitting they were wrong. Rather than, he said he was wrong, you could say, he confessed his mistake. Small vocabulary changes like these help your English sound more refined and accurate. Another useful area to expand is vocabulary describing sounds. Beginners often use simple words like loud or quiet, but at the C1 level, you might choose deafening for extremely loud sounds, faint for very soft sounds, and echoing when sound reflects off surfaces. For example, the music was deafening. I heard a faint whisper. Her voice was echoing through the hall. These choices create stronger images in the listener's mind. Picture yourself at a concert where the speakers are powerful. Instead of saying very loud, you could say the music was deafening. If someone speaks so softly you can barely hear them, you might explain, I heard a faint whisper. And in a large, empty building, you could describe how my footsteps were echoing in the hallway. Descriptive language like this makes your communication more vivid. Now let's focus on vocabulary related to thinking and learning. Basic verbs like think, know, or learn are useful, but advanced speakers often prefer analyze, comprehend, and acquire. For example, we need to analyze the data carefully. I finally comprehended the meaning of the story. Children acquire language naturally. These verbs sound more precise and professional. Imagine working on a school project. Instead of saying, we studied the data, you might say, we analyzed the data. After reading a challenging article, you could proudly say, I comprehended the article at last. And when discussing personal development, you might explain, he acquired new skills after months of training. Using these verbs adds clarity and depth to your speech. Weather is another common topic where advanced vocabulary can make a big difference. Instead of simply saying it's hot or it's cold, you can use words like scorching, freezing, or breezy. For example, it's scorching outside today. The water is freezing in winter. It's breezy on the beach this morning. These expressions make everyday conversations more engaging. Imagine stepping outside during a hot summer day. You might say, "It's scorching outside." When touching icy water, you could describe it as freezing. And while walking along the seaside with a gentle wind, you might comment, "It's breezy today at the beach." These small upgrades instantly make your language sound more natural and descriptive. Advanced vocabulary is also useful when talking about decisions. Rather than repeating words like choice or decide, you could use determine, resolve, or settle on. For example, they determined to continue their journey. She resolved to study harder this year. We finally settled on a plan. Each phrase adds a slightly more formal and sophisticated tone. Picture a family discussing where to go for dinner. Instead of saying, "We chose the restaurant," you might say, "We settled on a restaurant after much discussion." Or, imagine someone making a personal promise. You could say, "She resolved to be more patient." These alternatives make everyday conversations sound more polished. Now let's continue exploring vocabulary that helps you describe feelings of surprise and excitement. And that's where we'll finish today's episode. Take a moment to think about the new words and expressions you heard and try to use them naturally in your own conversations. Remember, real progress happens when you practice a little every day and stay consistent with your learning. Thank you for spending this time with me and being part of this journey. If you found this episode helpful, make sure you're following the podcast so you don't miss the next sessions. We'll continue building your confidence and helping you speak English more fluently and naturally. Until next time, keep listening, keep speaking, and keep moving forward with your English.